To watch my exclusive content not featured anywhere on YouTube, log on to my website at imjustheretomakeyoutthink.com/films.
You are now listening to ethnographic researcher Dane Calloway.
I want y'all to check out somebody named Dane Calloway.
Dane Calloway?
Look into Dane Calloway.
I'ma tell the truth and nothing but it, even if it's out of my constructed budget.
On I'm Just Here to Make You Think Radio.
Oseo everyone. This video is officially the next installment of my Easter Egg Sunday series. Now, to those of you that might have missed the latest one, I named it Easter Egg Sunday because this is where I will be discussing information concerning many of the visual messages that are presented throughout my documentaries that you might have missed. And each of these videos will be released every Sunday exclusively to you all watching and not anywhere else. I found this to be something very interesting, and I always wanted to talk about it as soon as I completed the production of a video. Because in most cases, the visual messages themselves will tell more information, but the viewer will only catch it if they pay closer attention to detail. So now let's go to this Easter egg clipped from one of my exclusive movies called Reversed, which is available to watch now using the link to my website below. At about right here, at this point of the movie, the viewer's attention is focused on a picture that has a lot going on, to say the very least. So I'll give you a few just to take it all in. Now tell me, what do you see in this picture? You may have noticed that the people who are depicted in this image are of a dark hue in complexion. And you will find that some of the people are wearing feathered headdresses, with the feathers pointing to the sky and not the ground. A few are also seen here wearing wraps or turbans. One of them is seen carrying arrows on his back and holding a bow in his right hand. The setting of this image appears to be taking place inside of an ancient spiritual dwelling, being as though we see that many people are formally gathered inside of this one location, with some kneeling and displaying gestures with their hands as if they are praying or meditating, or paying respects to this large statue-like figure standing on top of a decorated, elevated platform. This image was used in a very historical book that was released in London, England during the year 1671, in which the original title of this book was translated from Dutch to English at the time of printing as America, being the latest and most accurate description of the New World, which was written by author John Ogilvy, with cartography credits to Arnoldus Montanus. What is very important to note here is that all of the images utilized throughout this book were borrowed from the late 1590s watercolor collection of illustrator John White. And on page 139 of this book, the author titles it in English as Virginia. Now, some of you who have been subscribed to my channel for some years now can recall me informing you about this book throughout many of my previous documentaries, vlogs, and live streams here on my channel, because of how important it is when it comes to first European contact with some of the original inhabitants of this land, which most of you know now as North, Central, and South America. And let me add that this book also outlines some of the British colonialism taking place throughout the East and West Indies of the Americas during that time period. As I've been mentioning on numerous occasions ever since 2015, This historical book can be seen in person at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and it is also held by the New York Public Library under the Lionel Pincus and Princess Furyao Map Division of catalog number B144-67885. It is also found in the Lawrence H. Slaughter Collection under catalog number 3050, and it is also held by the National Endowment for the Humanities Society under Early Maps of the Mid-Atlantic Seaboard. You know how I like to cross-reference my research materials, right? So now, what I want to point out to you next is how deceitful American history can be when it comes to official historical accounts of already existing unmolested primary sources. And here's what I mean by that. For example, as of May 13th, 2015, the Virginia Historical Society claims that, quote, in 1671, the Amsterdam printer Jacob Moores published America by Arnoldus Montanus, a compilation in Dutch of historical accounts from North and South America. Montanus was a Jesuit and apparently sought illustrations that emphasized the non-Christian, heathen character of Native American religion. To that end, the unnamed artist for the book invented a Virginia scene that borrowed from images of Mexican Indian practice. This concocted scene was in turn copied by other artists. End quote. Now, some of this is correct, but there are also lots of errors made here concerning their narrow light claims. First of all, Arnoldus Montanus is in fact not the author of this book. He was the cartographer, which is the person responsible for drawing the maps inside of the book. Yes, he was a Jesuit, but that doesn't mean that he was the person responsible for choosing the images used inside of this book. And if the Virginia Historical Society wasn't so lazy at researching, they would have discovered the illustrator's name of these images, who I mentioned earlier as being John White, instead of jumping to their own assumptions, which are royally inaccurate. Or maybe you out there concur with the saying, all things happen for a reason, and you may think that this story was told this way intentionally. Which should make you ask some questions, like, why would the Virginia Historical Society claim that since Montanus was a Jesuit, that he would, quote, apparently sought illustrations that emphasized the non-Christian heathen character of Native American religion, when he wasn't even the illustrator of the image to begin with? And why would the Virginia Historical Society claim that the artist of these images is unnamed, meaning that they don't know his name or anything about him, but then proceed to give their opinions of this same artist as if they now know him by claiming that he, quote, borrowed from images of Mexican Indian practice? Is there really such a thing called a Mexican Indian practice, when the majority of the so-called Mexicans were historically followers of the Catholic Christian practice? The reason why they don't want you to look into the artists is because you will discover what really happened, which was that other artists were later hired to reproduce counterfeit images with European influence of some of these prominent images of North and South American cultures, along with their inhabitants. According to the New York Public Library, the title of this image read as King Powhatan, which is in fact misspelled here by the author, but you'll find that these types of errors are a common thing to happen, especially when dealing with foreigners writing our American history anyways. Where the Virginia Historical Society claims in 2015 that White borrowed from images of Mexican Indian practice, they are referring to the large statue-like figure you see here, smoking from a large pipe in ceremony. which is an actual representation of the spiritual guardian known as KIWASA by the indigenous Algonquin-speaking people located throughout the southernmost regions of North America, like Virginia, Maryland, and the Carolinas, just to name a few. But prior to this 1590 watercolor painting by John White being borrowed for the use of John Ogilby's book in 1671, it was also borrowed but fraudulently reproduced by engraver and publisher Theodore de Bry to look like this, with the release of a book that he published for author Thomas Harriot during the year 1590. Indeed, there's something wrong with this image, all the way down to the German text utilized surrounding the image itself. This engraving is being held right now by the Art Museums of Colonial Williamsburg in the state of Virginia. And what's essential to note here is that according to the Art Museums of Colonial Williamsburg itself, quote, the plate, which was engraved by Flemish engraver and publisher Theodore de Bry, depicts a Europeanized version of Carolina Algonquins based on the watercolors by John White and using the written descriptions by Thomas Harriot. In 1590, de Bry published Harriot's texts with engravings based on White's watercolors in a book entitled A Brief and True Report of the Newfound Land of Virginia, which was published in English, French, German, and Latin. The book provides the first printed English record of Sir Walter Raleigh's attempts to plant a colony in the New World. Although described in the title as Virginia, it delineates the region between the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay and Cape Lookout, North Carolina. He writes, quote, the inhabitants of this region have an idol called KIWASA, wrought from a wooden trunk, 4 feet high. This idol was kept in the temple of the town of Sakota as the guardian of the royal corpse. End quote. Also, let me clarify that this image does not depict that our ancestors were worshiping this large figure, but more so paying respects to it. In fact, John White created the majority of his images with small and large people in size, to indicate that the larger figure is a living person of royalty, sort of like a king or a chief in this sense. This also makes sense as to the reason why the New York Public Library and the Library of Congress have both indicated that the original title of this watercolor painting is King Powhatan, being as though some of the many Algonquin-speaking tribes were members of the Powhatan tribe living within this general southeastern area that was once called the Colony of Virginia by European immigrants from London. So now that we know for sure that this image was a reproduced counterfeit copy, that immediately nullifies all other copies of this same image that were produced by other artists soon after. This also exposes not only what the people of the American continent looked like originally, but it also exposes how the real image was changed to make it seem as if our ancestors were worshiping heathen, or rather pagan, idols of some false royalty of importance, when that is absolutely not true. And of course, this should also make you wonder about those images you see right now surrounding many religious societies, and how there is a very firm chance that those images were once changed to hide the truth as well, which is all the more reason why you should question everything. I'm just here to make you think.